welcome Monday morning forward bending practice. And I thought I'd make this week about kind of saving the back in our forward bends. And so our objective today will be to do forward bending, but really kind of without disturbing the back, or I like to say having the back notice. So trying to tap into other parts of our body to make the forward bending deeper, but without it always happening in the back. So that's our objective today. So let's go into our dominant cross-legged position. Just take a moment to arrange the flesh underneath the sitting bones, to move the shoulders in line with the hips. Taking some time to just kind of let the weight of the legs settle. Let the shoulders drop. Try to put the head in alignment with the spine. Soften the jaw. And then joining the hands in front of the heart as you're ready, closing the eyes, looking down toward your cheeks. And just starting that act of attention paying. Noticing whatever you do notice. Observing the rhythm of your breathing. Any sensations that are talking to you inside the body this morning. The busyness of the mind. Maybe noticing your ability to be present this morning. Maybe it's coming easily, maybe it's not as easy. And there's no wrong answers. We always just take this time to notice how we're beginning our practice. It's kind of accepting where we're starting from. And keeping your chest lifted, bow toward your heart. Release your hands down to your thighs. And on an in-breath, raise your head. Let your eyes come gently open. And welcome. So we're going to come into reclining bound angle pose as a way to begin this practice. Kind of just, we're going to kind of bookend this practice with supported back bends, just to kind of keep our back a little bit more neutral from all the flexion we're about to do. So you don't need to belt your legs. You're just going to take your feet together in the bound angle shape, and you can support your knees or thighs. And if you just joined, I think John just joined, make sure to know. We're going to use a wall for this practice. If that's not possible for you, don't worry about it. But if it is, we'll come to that in a little bit. So you're going to be reclining down. If you need support for your head, you can use it. If you like to have a little bit of a cushion behind the chest, like a bolster to lie back on, you can use that. We're not going to spend a ton of time setting this up. So basically, we just want to feel that the chest is able to remain open. The head has enough support that we're not feeling our chins wagging in the air. And we're letting the groin soften, and we're feeling a nice kind of neutral feeling to the lower back, hopefully. And we'll stay in the pose about 2 minutes. So just kind of noticing that incremental process of the body surrendering. It's not all at once. Breath by breath, we release a little bit of tension. With your palms turned up, just feeling how naturally open and spread your chest is. With the knees open wide, the hips are opening, the groins are releasing. Your breath is passively coming and going. Reminding ourselves here that all of our forward bending positions should include some remembrance of this feeling you have in your chest, this forwardness, this spread, openness. And just take a couple deep breaths here. And slowly begin to use your fingertips to join your knees. You can widen your feet and roll to either side. We're going to take a couple versions of downward facing dog using our blocks. So if you have wall access, you'll set those blocks up at the wall so that they aren't going to go anywhere. You're going to push on them. And if you don't have wall access, we're going to start with the blocks going underneath the heels. So just make sure they're on your sticky mat so that they're not going to roll away from you. And you can take a table position with your toes and your ball mounds kind of right in front of your blocks. And then on an exhale, lift your knees from the floor and make sure that the heels are on the blocks, but that really nothing else of your feet, the arches, the ball mounds, the toes are not. And so again, reminding you here that in all of these forward bends today, we're gonna not do our fullest, deepest. We're basically practicing in a way that we're trying to invite other areas of the body to elongate, and we're gonna try to keep the lower back kind of out of the equation. So your lower back should remain kind of in a neutral feeling if you can find a pose that will allow that. So that's our work today. One of the ways we can save the back in our forward bends is to invite some energy from the heel up to the hip socket. So use the blocks under the heels to really encourage that direction of the energetic movement from the heels to the hip sockets. So really bringing the femur heads into that ball and socket joint, really nice and snug. We'll just stay about 5 more breaths. If you can, come into child's pose if you need to leave earlier. And then go ahead and place your knees down if you haven't already. Widen your knees and sit back and make sure your head is supported. We'll come into child's pose so you can support your head on the floor, on your hands, on your fists, but try to keep the neck really long. So tuck your chin toward your chest and maybe rest a little closer to your hairline. And now we're going to kind of flip it around and we're going to give our hands a little extra height. So we're going to be putting our hands on the blocks now. And just because some of you don't have a wall and because I can face you this way, I'm going to do it without the wall. But those of you that have the wall, you're going to turn around and put your hands on those blocks and your wall should be right in front of the blocks. So if you're not using the wall, you're just going to be extra careful that your blocks aren't going to go out from under you. So with hands on blocks, either at the wall or without using the wall, taking table position, you can press up and draw your hips back. And remember, just try to keep the lower back quiet. And that might mean you need to bend your knees. It might mean that you are not in your deepest version of downward dog. So we can practice the same poses over and over again, but we always try to bring in kind of new perspectives, new kind of parts of the poses to look at up close with the magnifying glass. And just sense what this extra length in the upper body does for your downward dog, whether or not it gives the lower back more support. Five more breaths if you can, and of course coming down to child's pose if you need to come out earlier. Try to be even across your ball mounds. We all kind of have habits and favorites in the body, so just if you're feeling a little imbalanced across the ball mounds, really try to spread the weight out evenly. You can always use your stomach muscles to gently kind of create a little support for the lower back if you're feeling any sort of nagging. And now go ahead and come down onto the knees. Widen the knees, swing the feet together, sit back, and make sure the head comes down and that you're kind of tilting the chin into the chest to keep yourself in that singular curve along the spine of child's pose. So one of our deepest stretches for the legs, for the backs of the legs, is wide-legged standing forward fold. So I'm going to have everybody use a chair for head support. And then those of you that have the wall, you're also going to set up so that your backs of your legs and your butt are going to be supported by the wall. So if you don't have that wall, it's not going to destroy the pose. You'll be fine with the chair. It's just a little added support if you do have wall access. So we'll stand up and we'll take the chair, and that chair is going to be for the head. So if you have a metal chair, you might want to put something on it so that it's not only less cold, but maybe less hard. Make it comfortable for your head. I don't find that I need my mat under my feet when I do it this way, but if you feel like you are going to slide, of course, you're going to put a mat under your feet, or you have to move your mat. And so you're going to come into your wide stance. If you have the wall, you're just coming right up to the wall with the butt all the way down to the heels. Your toes, of course, are pointing forward. And then you're going to come down about halfway. Again, this is really so that we're modifying the pose so that the back can really stay quiet. And you're either going to rest the forehead on your arms, on the chair, on your fists. You can kind of do whatever you need to do to make a connection. And if you do have the wall, just notice how when you take away the element of balancing in this pose, you might find that you're able to go a bit deeper. Even if you're just using the chair, bringing in that additional support can sometimes allow deeper access to the forward bend. Spreading the backs of the knees. Make sure to scoop the belly toward the back to give it some support, broadening the lower back. See if you can kind of create that line of energy from your heels all the way up to your hips, lifting the legs, bones into the hip sockets. If you feel like you're sagging into your front ribs, try to pull the inner front ribs together and toward your back body. And we're going to stay another minute, so just keep tapping into your legs. Your head might be ready to lower down here. Try not to crush your pinky toe. If you feel like your pinky toe rolled under your feet, try to lift it out and spread it back out. Sucking the outer ankle bones in. And then as you're ready, you're going to start to lift your head. Use your hands to help you come up and out of it. Join your feet slowly, bring them back together. You can move your chair kind of toward the front of your mat. And just find yourself in mountain pose. I realize my head is cut off here. I'm going to move to the back of my mat. Just put yourself in mountain pose for a few moments. Finding kind of a firmness to your legs and an evenness to your feet. Finding the alignment of this standing upright pose. Lifting the chest, but without distorting your lower back. Feeling a sense of buoyancy in the torso, but keeping the gaze pointed away from the brain. Good. And now we'll come into a chair version of downward dog. So you can go ahead and find your chair. And I'm going to show this sideways just so you can see kind of the alignment of it a little bit better. A lot of you have done this many times before, but the idea is to keep your legs vertical, but you're going to start to create a more diagonal torso. So you're extending the arms, but you're trying to keep contact of your hands to your chair. You're going to widen your feet hip distance to allow for a nice broad lower back. And if you need to keep knees bent to keep your lower back quiet, you're going to do that. Gently drawing your hips away from the chair, but keeping your hands really well pressured against the chair so that you're dynamic in your arms. And if you're feeling the low back talking to you, play with small movements. It could be a knee bend, it could be a belly scoop. It could be coming a little closer to the chair. So play with small movements so that the back is quiet. I've said it many times before, the quote that the source of action in the pose is the weakest point. And the lower back is not the weakest point for some of us, but it is the most mobile. And so it does drive a lot of our forward bend. So today we're making these forward bends about other parts of the body. We're going to try to take the back and let it be secondary today. We'll just stay about 5 more breaths. I'm going to start to look forward, bring your weight forward, and walk yourself in. Bring yourself upright. And again, once you're upright, just put the chair aside and step into your mountain pose and just notice. So the noticing is just as important as all the action we're doing. Action is movement with intelligence applied. So just notice how that lands, what your lower back might be saying to you here. Good. Now we're going to come into a heel supported Parshvottanasana. And if you don't have a wall behind you, you'll just have to bring a lot of awareness to your back heel being really anchored. So we are all going to use the chair just so we can kind of have more support. We're going to put the blanket on the chair seat if that was something that was kind of comforting to you. And then you're going to set up with your left heel to the wall or the left heel stepping back, whatever is the version you're doing. So if you have the heel to the wall, just use that to kind of reinforce that connection of your legs moving up into the hip sockets. And if you don't have the wall, just bring a lot of intention to your heel, really remaining anchored, but that whole leg bone shifting up. And you're going to start with your hands right on top of your chair seat. And just take a moment in that concave or flat lumbar position. Your right foot is forward, your legs are straight. You're doing a little bit of a swivel to invite the left hip forward, right hip back. And just take a moment to kind of visualize your femur heads at the top of your femur bones and your thighs, really moving up into the hip sockets. This is one way we bring more length to these poses. On an exhale, you're going to go into whatever your version of your full Parsvottanasana is today, with the objective of your back remaining quiet. So it might be that you just soften your elbows a little bit. It might not be that your head comes all the way down. So this is all about the back. Make it all about the back. If left heel is on the wall, really plant it there. Use that to reinforce that upward line of energy in your leg. And if not, just bringing your imagination into it a little bit more. See if you can find a way to kind of squeeze your legs toward one another, from front to back, from back to front, and see what that does for your lower back. Be here another minute on this side. And your head might be coming down. So just kind of observe if the head is coming down. Maybe you can set it on your stacked fists at this point. Maybe not. I'm just kind of following the pose as it evolves. I want you to notice how much the right leg desires to push forward and try to resist that. So when the right leg pushes forward, that femur head is coming away from the hip socket. We might start to slope in the right hip. So see if you can pull that right leg bone up into the hip joint, and maybe your back gets a little saved by this. Keeping weight in your back heel. Keeping weight in your back heel. Last 4 breaths. On an in-breath, you can start to lift your head, move your hands to the chair seat, help yourself bring your feet together. Take a moment to stand up, keeping the feet separated and shoulders arriving above the hips. And just close the eyes, dropping the gaze down, playing with the feet a little bit to find more balance and ease and spaciousness and connection. Finding your neutral pelvic tilt. So if the pelvis was full of liquid, it would be flush to the top. It's not spilling out the front or back. And as you're ready, you're going to open your eyes and set up for the second side of Parsvottanasana. And if you're using the wall, you'll just anchor the right heel to the wall. And if not, you're just going to anchor the right heel as best you can to the floor. And if you don't have a heel that comes down, some of us don't, you could put a blanket under your heel so that you can really feel that connection of your heel engaging down. Okay, and just start with your hands right under your shoulders. Swivel the hips, so we're pulling left hip back, right hip comes forward here. Compact the hips toward midline. Take a moment to feel that clamping action of your legs, scrubbing the left foot toward the wall behind you. And then on an exhale, go into a forward bend, the complete forward bend, but the back is the primary goal here, that the back is not really the one taking the toll here. A quiet lower back, recruiting other actions in the body. Keeping that visualization of the thigh bones moving into the hip joints. And if you keep weight in your right heel, you should have a lot of help for your lower back. Gently bringing a little bit of lifting to the lower abdominals to support your back here. Good. Last 5 breaths. After this next exhale, start to lift your head. Place your hands on your chair seat. Help your feet come together. And we'll keep the blanket, but we'll move the chair aside. And we're going to fold the blanket up so that we can step on the kind of a thicker blanket with the toes and the ball mounds. So I know my head's cut off, so I'm going to step back here a little bit. So the blanket will tip your weight into your heels. So just right away, bring some weight to your ball mounds and your toes. But notice how the lifted toes help you engage the wise actions of the knees, kind of plugging in, the thighs becoming contracted. Put your shoulders in line with your hips. Close your eyes. And you're just in mountain pose with elevated front feet. In a moment, we're going to forward bend with the elevated front feet, but just kind of imprinting here the firmness of the legs. We're going to have this be the primary goal, the firmness of the legs. And when we come into forward bend, we're just going to try to keep the legs as they are. So we're only going to forward bend whatever amount of degrees that is to keep our legs in these really nice actions right here. Okay, so open your eyes if they were closed. Place the chair. You might need to step off the blanket for safety, but you're going to place the chair, and I'm going to turn my blanket so my chair actually fits. But you're going to put the high part of the chair in front of you. Because I don't expect a lot of us are going to go very deep. So we're going to start with the higher part of the chair being available. You can always go to the seat if you find you can go deeper. We'll come back to your elevated front feet, the ball mounds and all 10 toes are on the blanket. Your arches should be kind of free and clear of anything, and your heels, of course, are on the mat. And go back to your mountain with your legs really just kind of plugging into those wise actions. Your thighs are firm, your kneecaps are really engaging back, you're feeling very strong and your legs very firm. And now take the chair in your fingertips and just start to bend forward, but you're going to observe your legs as you do so. Observe that your chest stays kind of in the sunlight. And if your back starts to complain, then you're going to come out of it a little bit. So we want to keep the legs in wise actions. If you're all back in the heels, make sure to press your front feet down. And you're bending forward, but if the back complains, you're going to back off. So you're just going to kind of Goldilocks it here. If you find you can go down to the chair seat, you can do that, but remember it's really about legs remaining in wise actions and the lower back staying in a supported kind of neutral sensation zone, not in a complaining or nagging or kind of exploiting the lower back kind of situation. So this kind of work is hard because our egos like to step in and say, we should be here, or you should do more. But don't let your ego be part of the equation here. Have it be all about sensation. And we'll just stay about another 8 breaths. Make sure you're not all in your heels. You really have to stay kind of persistent with the front feet anchoring down. Last breath. And on an in-breath, you can help yourself come up. And move things aside, move the chair aside, move the blanket aside. And one last time, we're gonna step into mountain pose. Just to notice quietly, wider stance with the feet, maybe slightly wider than your hips. Inner thighs, just gently directing them back. Taking the tailbone into the body, rolling the shoulders back. Adjusting the skull if necessary. And feeling how maybe the legs are remaining in that kind of firm, wise action state after that good training. If your butt is clamping, your inner thighs are probably rotating forward, so just gently roll the inner thighs back. And move the midline, the horizontal midline of the buttocks toward the front body. So the wise actions are really to find neutral, to equalize in the body, not to distort. Okay, so we'll release Tadasana. And we're going to, I feel like there was one last thing I wanted to do here, but I'm forgetting. So we're going to come down to seated, and you're going to sit on the edge of your blanket. And you'll have your strap also available. And the chair is just off to the side. When we want to rest the head on it, we can use it. So come into Dandasana, seated staff position. With your hands right next to your hips. And if you need to, you can always run your fingertips down the backs of your legs, kind of helping the legs sit down a little bit more readily. For some of us, we have kind of more muscles in the legs, and we have to kind of help the legs sit down a little bit better. So we're going to try to flex the feet, pull the toes towards us, and see if you can just kind of squeeze the little gaps behind the knees a little bit more shut. So you're kind of spreading the backs of the knees toward the floor. Okay, so we'll come into Janu Shirshasana here. We're going to take hold of the inner right knee with our two hands, just kind of dragging the knee back and pulling the heel in toward the upper inner thigh, and then supporting there if necessary. We're just supporting under that right knee if you need to. And right away, I want you to kind of notice how the left leg shoots forward, which causes our torso to turn to the right. So I want you to resist all of that, and you're going to kind of pull your left knee, your left heel toward your left hip. You'll notice that your torso starts to turn, face the left leg, and you'll notice that right knee moves forward. So we want to kind of, again, clamp the legs toward each other. Feel the left femur head moving into the hip socket. Sense that, or envision it, whatever works for you. Take your hands down to either side of the thigh. And just, we're going to overshoot. We're going to turn, we're going to revolve the torso to the left to kind of correct for that rotation that wants to occur in the opposite direction. So we're just kind of gently coaxing the torso to face the left in an upright position with the spine. You're still feeling the right knee pull forward. That's a good thing. You're feeling the left heel sucking in toward the left hip. That's a good thing. And you're still pressurizing the back of the left knee against the floor. And after this exhale, you're going to come out of the twist, but leave your sternum pointing directly at your left leg. And now you're just going to creep forward slightly, any amount, where you're keeping yourself on target here with your chest and leg lining up. And you're also not feeling any complaint from the lower back. Those are kind of the limiting factors. That's your edge today. That's where you're going to be. If you feel any complaint from the lower back, back off, come up a little bit with the torso, maybe reapply some of those wise actions we just talked about, maybe play with other actions in your body. The abdominals engaging could be a good one. And don't worry if you're still pretty upright with your trunk. That's not what this is about today. So you should feel that the left heel is moving toward your hip. And I was going to originally teach this with the left heel at the wall, and the experience there was actually that the foot couldn't touch the wall. So imagine you have a wall right up against your left foot, and you really want to push into that wall. We want to do the opposite. We want to gently keep that foot away from that imaginary wall by scrubbing that leg back toward the hip. Okay, just a few more breaths. Go deeper if you can. And when you're ready, inhale and come up with your torso. We're going to stand that right knee up and extend the right leg. And just take a moment before you come back to Dandasana, pressing the legs into the floor. Just give them a little refresh here. You might bounce them. You might kind of massage them. So whatever you need to do to refresh. And then go ahead and find Dandasana again. You should be right on the edge of the blanket with your sitting bones. Some of us need a little more height under the sitting bones. Like Mary, I know you've told me you're tight, so you might take more height under your sitting bones if that supports you. A lot of people, it does. Okay, so now we're going to try other side. Both hands are going to kind of come in behind the inner left knee. You're going to drag that knee back, but try not to have it raise up too high. Just pulling the heel in as close as you can to the upper inner thigh here. Supporting that knee if it's floating in the air, give it a little bit of either a block or a blanket. And then you're going to use your fingertips to help you turn. Turning away from the direction, the left, that the torso wants to pull toward. Keep gently coaxing it to the right, and we're going to overshoot it. So eventually maybe you'll see your sternum kind of passing beyond the right leg. That's fine. We're going to kind of overshoot so that when we leave this twisting action, we end up pretty much in alignment with the right leg is the goal. So while you're twisting, just see about finding that action of drawing the right heel toward the right hip. Sensing how that supports the action of the bent knee side, staying engaged. How it supports you from wanting to turn the other direction. And after this exhale, leave the twist only the amount that leaves you lined up sternum to right leg. And then creeping forward any amount to come into a very mild head to knee pose. Keeping the leg actions in place, keeping your lower back quiet and neutral. So I'd say most of my effort here is with the leg action, pulling my right heel toward my right hip, keeping my torso lined up well. I'm not even concerned with my degree, my torso to the floor. Good. Last 3 or 4 breaths here. And now inhale and bring yourself up. Just go ahead and stand up your left knee, extend your left leg, give your legs a little bounce or a shake. Sit up nice and tall. All right, so we're going to come into Upavishta Konasana, which is the wide legs, and I usually recommend sitting on the corner of a blanket. And I'm not going to put my chair in front of me right now because I want to see you guys. But if you'd like to set yours up, we are going to do a seated forward bend in a little while. Otherwise, you'll have a chance to grab it when we come to that part. So it's your choice if you want to put it there now or not. But come onto the blanket corner and have the corner be right under your tailbone, not under the sitting bone. So it's a very small piece of blanket that we're using. It's small, but it can be thick, meaning it can be really nice and high. So don't worry about how high it is. We just don't want it touching the sitting bones. So once you're on that corner, just move the flesh out. Make sure your tailbone is feeling that lift of the blanket, but your sitting bones are coming around the blanket corner. They're not on it. And then you're going to take your feet to their widest and place your hands behind you. And find the centers of your sitting bones. And find those same legs you felt when you had the elevated front feet in mountain pose. So pressing the heels out away from you, pulling the toes towards you, but sucking the femur heads into the hip sockets. Plant your legs. But soften your face. The face doesn't need to be part of this. Soften the face, soften the jaw. Okay, make this all about the legs. Keep what you have going on in your legs. Bring your hands now to the front of you and inner thighs. And now keeping your legs as they are, any amount, creep your fingertips forward. So you're angling your torso slightly toward the floor. But if you lose any of that wise action in your legs, or if your back starts to complain, you're going to back off. Okay, really visualize pulling those thigh bones up into the hip sockets, scrubbing the heels toward the hip sockets, keeping your lower back quiet. Like it's a sleeping baby, we don't want to wake up. Keeping the gaps behind the knees very minimal. Using the lower abdominals to spread toward the lower back as additional support. Keeping your chest in the sunlight. And then inhale, come up. Give your legs a little bounce. You can even narrow them if you need to. We are going to go back to wide legs though. So if you did kind of bring them in a little bit to release the hips, come back to your widest when you're ready. And now we're going to turn and face the left leg. And then we're going to reach back with the torso toward the right leg. Use your right arm kind of against the floor. Take your left hand to your left hip. Good. So we're revolving the pose. We're going to turn the chest to face up to the left. And now you're going to gently turn and face your right leg, bringing both hands around to either side of the right leg. And bow over the right leg, but have your attention really being in the left leg, anchored and pulling toward the hip line. Yeah. And then you're going to crawl the hands, keeping your torso low, crawl your hands to the middle space. And then walk the hands in to stack your spine. Good. Okay, awesome. Other side. So we're going to do this a few times. We're going to turn now to face the right leg. Yeah, and then lean back toward your left leg. Use your left arm kind of for leverage on the floor. You might get the elbow against the thigh. Take your right hand toward your right hip, onto your right hip. And then using the power of your legs and arms, turn your chest to face kind of toward the right ceiling line. Notice if your heels are running away from you or if you are able to keep pulling them toward the hip line. Good. And now you're going to turn and face your left leg with your hands coming to either side of it. And bow gently over the leg. Scrubbing that right heel toward your right hip. And keep yourself low and creep to the middle space again. Good. And then walk your hands in. Good. And then narrow your legs if you need to release or bounce. So we're going to do it one more time. Okay, so go back to your widest. Find your firm planted legs. And we're going to turn to face left again. Good. Tilt your torso toward your right leg and try to get that right arm into place. So you can kind of dig the elbow in, hopefully on your thigh or to your inner thigh. Take your left hand to your left hip and turn your chest as well as you can. Point it at the ceiling. And try to pull that left heel in toward the hip. Beautiful. And now you're going to gently rotate around to face the right leg. Bow over it. And then keeping low, creeping to the middle space. And then creeping fingertips towards center to stack the spine. Okay, one last time. We're going to be turning, starting to face the right leg. And then tilting your torso toward the left leg, using left elbow against left thigh, right hand to right hip. Reaching the chest toward the ceiling. Good. And now turning to face your left leg, hands to either side of it, scrubbing the left heel toward the left hip, right heel toward the right hip. Keeping your lower back quiet, sleeping baby. And then gently crawling the hands to the middle space and walking them toward yourself to stack your spine. Go ahead and sweep the legs in and shift forward off of your blanket. Put your arms around your shins and sit up nice and tall. Just take a couple moments letting that go. Good work. Okay, so last but not least, Hashimoto Nasana, seated forward bend with head support to the chair. So we're going to sit on a blanket, and you might need a second blanket for the chair if you don't already have one out. Take as much height underneath your sitting bones as you need so that your lower back is either flat or concave, that you're not starting from a rounded place. We won't get very far if we start from a rounded place with the back. And the chair seat is going to be the head support, using the edge of the chair seat. And you can stick your legs right underneath the chair. Some of us have a bar on the chair. You can use that to align your toes above your heels. Can be a nice little additional prop. And just remember that you don't need to get your head directly to the chair. You could add a block. You could use your own fists or hands. So you could do prayer position with your hands to prayer, your forehead against your thumbs. So take a moment to adjust your legs, and then finding that initial Paschimottanasana, the Western facing forward bend, that makes you feel like you can sustain wise actions in your legs, and you can keep your lower back really neutral and quiet, undisturbed. And here there's a real big kind of desire to push out through the heels. Can you find a little more soothing in your back if you find a way to move your heels toward your hips? Notice how there's a cascading forward, a wave of motion in the body that kind of invites the torso to come forward when we do that. And not in a way that's yanking on the back. We'll be here another 2 minutes. So make sure you're in a place that's sustainable, but that you're not complacent. You haven't checked out, so that would be underwhelming. Give yourself a little bit more to prick your consciousness, make it a little more active if you're finding that you're bored or asleep or mind is wandering. Try to recall the feeling of your Tadasana legs with the elevated front feet. Keep directing your inner thighs down. sealing the gaps behind the knees, behind the ankles. About 5 more breaths. On an inhale, gently start to lift your head. You can start to kind of deconstruct your pose, move your chair. We're going to come into a supported bridge just to soothe the back. So the bookending little mild back bends kind of on either side of this practice, just to make sure that our backs come kind of to a neutral place. I'm turning sideways. Most of you know this pose, but you just want to take either the low setting or the medium setting of your horizontal block underneath your sacrum. And then you're going to have your shins be vertical for these intents and purposes today. So you don't need to walk heels in close, and have your feet a little wider than your hips and take your toes slightly in. So a little bit of a pigeon stance with your feet rather than a duck or pigeon. Be on the backs of your hands. Rock your head and let your chin and chest close toward each other. And just let the lower abdomen sink toward the lower back with every exhale. Into the block, into the floor. Your legs now are passive, and they should be enjoying that after so much action. The buttocks should be soft. We'll stay another minute here. And with an exhale, you can just kind of step into your feet enough that you can help the block come out from under you and let the spine come down. And taking the feet even wider, just start to rock the knees to each side. Maybe including the head turning in the opposite direction. And as you're ready, you can slow it down and check in with the body, see if there's anything else that needs to move or shift. And then begin to set up for Shavasana as you're ready. We'll have a 5-minute Shavasana today. And sometimes putting the lower legs on the chair can be a nice way to kind of follow up with a forward bending practice. Or the rolled blanket behind the knees is another good support. Or of course, just stretching out in that classical fully reclined position, if that's going to work for you. We want the body to feel supported and passive. And those are the key goals for Shavasana, so the body can really just surrender. It doesn't have to hold itself together. It's the pose of zero effort. So use the props to help you get there. Once you find yourself in position, just start to gently scan your body from top to bottom, sending out that message of letting go, surrender, of ease. Any lingering, contracted energy, just letting it go, letting it turn out again. Observing your own breath as if from a distance. Seeing the ebb and flow of your breath. Sensing any effects of our practice as they start to integrate into the mind. Maybe finding more sustained state of presence here. Noticing sensation within and without in real time. And just take a few deeper breaths now. Inhaling, drawing the breath from your feet all the way up to the top of your head. And in a steady, slow way, releasing that breath as completely as you can from the body. Feeling that urge to breathe in, and then just allowing yourself to float back into automatic breathing. Staying for a couple moments, just witnessing your breath flow again. And start to gently invite small, simple movements, starting the outermost parts of your body, letting the movement trickle in, eventually bending knees and elbows. And from there, moving to either side of your body. When you get to your side, just remain there for another 5 breaths or so. Not in any rush, moving at the speed of presence and using only the effort needed. Slowly moving your hands to the floor, coming up by pressing down through your hands. And finding yourself in your simple seated position, easy seated position, good space pose. Sukha is good asana pose. So you're going to bring your hands together in front of your heart. Lifting the corner of the mouth. Let's take a big breath in through the nose. Nice big breath. And let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Right. Well, thank you all for being here today, and I hope to see you back soon, maybe Friday. Enjoy the warm weather. And John, I got your email, and I'm so glad to see you this morning. I'm glad you're recovering.